He's a former corporate human resources executive and has dedicated his career to helping leaders build organizations that are good for both people and for profits. Please welcome to this stage, make a little bit of noise for keynote speaker, author, and consultant, Jason Lauritsen.
Good morning. Let me start by saying that I am honored to be here with you. It is great to be in a space sharing a couple of days with people who are very seriously and legitimately committed to creating a great workplace for their people, and I do not take that lightly, so I'm honored to be here. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all you do. Number two, before we get started, since the pandemic sort of reminded us of the importance of human connection, I always like to make space for a moment of authentic human connection. And so what I'd ask you to do in just a moment when I say go, is I'd ask you to stand up and greet the people around you in a very specific way. I want you to, for each person, look them in the eye, give them a fist bump, and say, "I'm glad you're here." You got it? Ready, set, go. Awesome. How's that feel? Feels good, doesn't it? I'm always struck by how that simple moment of acknowledgement, feeling acknowledged and valued, is so powerful. And I just want to remind you that took seconds, it cost us nothing, and yet it has such a profound impact, right? We can feel it. You'll be feeling that later. And so we need to make room for that as much as we can in our lives. So thank you for doing that. So let's get started. My goal over the next 45 minutes or so with you is to challenge you to think differently about how we manage human performance at work. Because the legacy of management practice that we all inherited, that was passed down to us from previous generations, is very broken. But before we can talk about what we should do to fix it, we have to understand how it got broken in the first place. And to do that, we have to talk about ham. Obviously, right? Because ham is delicious if you're into that sort of thing. Actually, this is a story that I first remember hearing years ago, and some of you may have heard it. It's about a young married couple who is hosting holiday dinner for the first time at their house. And so this young couple is in the kitchen. They're preparing dinner, or preparing, the dinner for the holiday party. And the husband's on kind of one end of the counter cutting potatoes, and the wife is on the other end getting the ham ready to go in the oven. And as the husband is working, he notices out of the corner of his eye that his wife had taken the ham, had gotten out a cutting board, had put the ham on a cutting board, and then took a butcher knife and cut off both ends of the ham before she then put it in the pan to put it in the oven. And he thought this was a little strange because he'd never seen anybody do this before. And so he asks her, he's like, "Honey, why did you cut the ends off the ham before you put it in the oven?" And she stopped and thought about it for a second, and she said, "I assume it has something to do with the ham cooking more evenly or something," but she's like, "Honestly, I don't really know. That's just what my mom always did." And so now they're curious, right? They have time on their hands. It's a lot of time for things to cook. So they decide to call mom and see why she does this. And so they get mom on the phone, and the young woman explains to her mom the question that had come up. And she says, "Mom, why do we cut the ends off the ham before you put it in the oven?" And the mom stops for a second. She thinks, and she says, "You know what? I don't really know. That's just what my mom always did." Well, now they've got a bona fide mystery on their hands, right? And thankfully, Grandma is still alive and well, and so they decide to call Grandma to get to the bottom of this mystery, the mystery of the ham. And so they get on the phone to Grandma, and they explain the situation to Grandma, and the young woman says, "Grandma, why do we cut the ends off the ham before we cook it?" Now, unlike the other two women, Grandma does not pause to think about it or contemplate it. Instead, she bursts into laughter, which was very confusing for this young couple. And so the young woman says, "Grandma, what are you laughing about? What's so funny?" And she says, "Well, my dear, the reason I cut the ends off my ham was because it wouldn't fit in my pan otherwise." It's like, I have no idea why you would continue to do such a thing. I love this story. And the reason I love this story is because it is a perfect parable to help us understand how we've gotten into the mess we're in with how we manage human performance at work. So much of what we do today is the equivalent of cutting the ends off our ham without knowing why. You see, in this story, what began for Grandma as a practice born out of necessity, right? She couldn't get that ham in the pan without doing what she did. This practice was then passed down through 2 generations to a time when not only was it not necessary, it was clearly wasteful, and yet year after year after year they continued to do it until someone finally interrupted the cycle by asking, why? And so I think you'll notice this story will sound very familiar when you hear the story of the evolution of management. The only difference is that the story I'm about to tell you is a true story. It's a story that begins in the late 1800s. This is during a time of industrialization and the Industrial Revolution, and as you'll remember from your history classes, this was a time when there was a mass migration of people from small communities and sort of agricultural jobs to the cities for these new factory jobs that were sort of coming into existence. And a lot of these jobs in these factories were doing work that was actually better suited for machines, right? But these machines had not been created yet. And so we needed human beings to stand in for the machines that we would someday have. The problem with that is that humans are a bad substitute for machines, right? We get distracted and tired. We want to talk to our neighbor, right? We want to go on breaks. All of this. And so in this model where we had these humans standing in for machines, humanity was a problem, right? It was a problem for throughput and efficiency and production. And so to deal with this humanity problem, there was a new role, a new body of work created to address it, and it was called management. And it was wildly effective, right? It was wildly effective. It was needed at the time. This was Grandma cutting the ends off her ham. But as we all know, over time, work evolved. Work changed, right? Instead of being in a factory doing rote, routine, mechanical, repetitive tasks, we moved on. Those machines did come into existence, and eventually we had things like knowledge work and creative work and collaborative work that came into existence to a point today where not only is humanity not a problem to be solved, humanity is a necessity to do the very work that we depend on today. That innovation and collaboration. And yet, generation to generation, we continue to pass down these production-based management approaches to treating people more like a means of production than a human being. It is time to stop cutting off the ends of our hams when it comes to managing performance. We need a different way. And to find that different way, we need to travel to Iowa. Second plot twist. Iowan, I am taking it. We have an Iowan in the house. Absolutely. A couple. Smartest group I've been in front of in a long time, clearly. The reason we're going to Iowa is because that is where I grew up. I grew up on a farm in northwest Iowa. Now, for those of you, any other farm kids in here? Okay, so I see this. So for those of you that are farm kids, can you attest that when you grow up on a farm, you get put to work very early in your life, right? Real work. Now, one of my first jobs was something called walking beans. Now, I know FOMO is washing over you right now. And I'm about to put you out of that misery, because it was a pretty terrible job. Because at the time, because I'm clearly fairly old, this has been a long time ago. At the time when I was a kid, this is probably when I was 10 or 11 years old, one of the primary issues that farmers had to deal with, primary threat to their crops, was weeds, as it continues to be. Because weeds they grow faster than this is a soybean field that you're looking at. Weeds grow faster than the bean plant, so they will not only block out kind of sun and moisture, but they'll also suck nutrients out of the soil. It will literally wreak havoc on the harvest, which can have a real impact on the farmer's ability to earn a living. And so they had to deal with weeds, but at the time there wasn't a whole lot of options on how to do it. And so walking beans was the equivalent at scale of dealing with the weeds the way a gardener deals with weeds in the garden, taking them on one by one. And so what it looked like is they would round up your own kids and the neighbor kids and anybody else who, didn't know any better or didn't have a choice, and you'd take them out to the field. You'd give them a weapon of some sort, a sharpened garden hoe, or my favorite, which was something called a farmer's knife, which was like or a corn knife, which is like a farmer's machete. It was just this big blade with a handle, which I don't know why they were giving that to 11-year-olds, but that's a whole nother thing. But we would just walk up and down bean rows, cutting out weeds one by one. It was terrible work, it was hot work, it was boring work, but it was work that was vitally important for that farmer. And I tell you this because farmers have, since the beginning of agriculture, been going to incredible lengths to create the best possible growing conditions for their crops. And in farming, they call this work cultivation. Farmers cultivate their crops in a whole variety of ways. They have to deal with weeds, but they also have to deal with insects. They have to worry about, the soil nutrients, so they might be fertilizing or putting nitrogen in their soil. Sometimes they have to irrigate to get water out there. Sometimes they have to tile to drain water away. They go to great lengths. But here's something that is really important to know about farmers, is that a farmer operates with perfect confidence that if they put the right seed in the right field, in the right situation, that seed will grow into the best possible version of itself. It will maximize its potential so long as it has what it needs and no obstacles get in its way. A farmer knows that seed is genetically hardwired to become the very best that it can be. It doesn't need to be motivated to grow. It just needs to be supported, and that is the work of farming. That is the work of cultivation. And as I considered how farmers did their work, it hit me, right? That the model that we've needed to replace these outdated production-minded management approaches have been in front of us the whole time, perhaps for thousands of years, right? Cultivation is the answer. And certainly, human beings are more complicated than plants when it comes to growth. I'll grant you that, but I think the principles hold. For example, it's hard to argue that growth and performance is the default setting for human beings. If you have been around a small version of us, a baby or a toddler recently, it's hard not to marvel at how we learn how to speak and interact and walk and talk, all these things. We learn all of these incredibly complex things by simply being around bigger versions of ourselves doing it. We are learning and growth and performance machines. It is built into us in the same way that it is genetically hardwired into that seed. Then you pair that up with something else I believe to be true about humans, which is that given the means and opportunity, we will choose success over failure every single time. Now, how did I arrive at this conclusion? Well, for me, it started early in my management career when I was perhaps a little bit jaded when I ran into someone who wasn't performing or behaving very well at work. And I would attribute kind of ill intentions or ill character traits to that individual, but then I started to challenge myself with this question, right? Do I think that I have encountered anyone in my life who gets out of bed every morning and thinks, boy, I really hope I let down the people counting on me today. I hope today I really fail. I don't think so. I think every single human being, given the means and opportunity, will choose success over failure. Now, I've met some people that are in pretty tough circumstances that seem to be in a pretty self-destructive cycle, but I also believe that if they truly had the opportunity to interrupt that cycle, they would. So if we pair those two things together, growth and performance is the default, and that we will choose success over failure every time, what that means is that if someone is not performing at work, it's because there's something they need that they don't have, or there's an obstacle in their way. That is the only explanation. Just like the farmer knows if their crops aren't growing, it's because there's something missing or there's something interfering. You will never hear a farmer go, those darn seeds just aren't growing, because they know better. And so if this is true, and if we're going to adopt this cultivation approach to management and leadership, then that means that the work of the manager, just like the work of the farmer, is to meet needs and address obstacles. Help employees either remove obstacles or help them learn how to get around them. You with me so far? All right. Now let me illustrate. This seems very abstract. I think the place that you can see this probably most clearly is when we have the most challenging management situation that we all face, which is the underperforming employee. Right? When you have someone that's not living up to expectations or is behaving in a way that we wouldn't prefer, right? That isn't what's expected, and we have to deal with that. Now, in a traditional production-minded approach, right, where we're thinking of humans as means of production, the two questions that guide our approach to that employee are these. How do I fix you? And if I can't fix you, how do I replace you with a better model? Right? This is what performance improvement plans are about. This is what performance appraisals are built on. This is what where the thinking came from. And if this makes you uncomfortable, it should, because it is the same way that we think about our device when it starts getting wonky. My daughter just sent me a text the other day. She's like, Dad, my speaker quit working again. I think we're going to have to maybe replace my phone. Right? That is how we think about people in a production-minded approach, but it's very different in cultivation, because in cultivation, we know the person isn't broken. We know the person would be performing and meeting expectations if they had what they needed and they weren't facing an obstacle. And so the questions that guide our approach are very different. This puts you in a partnership with the employee as opposed to sort of being at odds. It's not fun to be on the other side of that conversation where somebody's saying, yeah, you're broken and you need to fix yourself or else. You see how that feels very different? Yes? So this might beg the question, okay, great, but how do we do that? What does that look like in actual practice? Here's my second sort of fact that I will share with you about farmers and how they approach the work of cultivation. If any of you know farmers, or you grew up around farmers, or even master gardeners, people that have big gardens that they're very serious about, one thing that you can tell people are true about them is that they are borderline obsessed with checking in on their crops, on their garden. Right? They want to know how things are growing, like growth rate, soil moisture, soil composition. They're checking in all of the time. And so if we are going to cultivate human performance, we need to be equally obsessed with checking in with our employees. Thankfully, we have this wonderful tool called the check-in conversation. It became wildly popular during the pandemic, right? We were being told by everybody everywhere we should be checking in with everybody we've ever met. Right? Check-ins became very popular. But can we all agree that not all check-ins are created equal? Right? So I'm talking about an effective check-in. What does that look like? An effective check-in does three things at a minimum. One, it helps you learn what's really going on with the other person, whoever they are. It helps you identify at work in particular what needs they have or what obstacles they might be facing, and it helps you build connection. Pretty valuable stuff. So if I told you that I could share with you a 4-step check-in process that would guarantee that you can have an effective check-in every time you do it, would you be interested in something like that? That's good, because you'd be dismissed otherwise. We're going to do it. All right, so let's get in. 4 steps. 4 steps. Number 1, first step is, wait for it, ask a great question. And you're like, this is your brilliant steps. Here's the thing about this. This is the step that we most commonly get wrong. Because what's the most common question we ask when we're going to do a check-in with someone? How are you, right? It's the universal check-in question. And what do they say? Fine, good, busy sometimes. My 15-year-old says decent. But what do we know? We don't know anything. It's the equivalent of saying hello. Right? I'm going to pretend to acknowledge you, you're going to pretend to care, and then we're going to move on. And so the first step is ask a great question. A great question is this. This is not a great question because it doesn't do this. A great question invites a response that demands a follow-up. So it's a question that you must follow up on, right? Otherwise, why are we doing this? The whole point of a check-in conversation is to have a conversation. And so we need to get into that. The check-in, the great question is how you get into that check-in conversation. So what does a great check-in question look like? We can actually take this question and make it into a great question pretty simply. It looks like this. On a scale from 1 to 10, how are you today? 10 being couldn't be better, 1 being couldn't be worse. Now, I know that feels a little weird at first, but here's the thing. It doesn't take any longer for someone to answer it, same amount of syllables, but the difference is, if I show up and say, how are you today on a scale from 1 to 10, and you say 5, and I go, all right, good to hear, check in with you next time. Feels a little weird, right? You almost have to step into that because you just created an opportunity where they opened a door to an interesting conversation. So whatever number they give you, they've just created this opportunity to actually have a conversation. So if we're going to ask a great question, which demands a follow-up, what do we think step number 2 is? Ask the follow-up question. Or questions, depending on how many questions you need. So you ask the follow-up question. So I'm going to illustrate this with, let's stay with the same how are you 1 to 10 scale. So let's say you ask that question, and this is the universal check-in. Depending on what you get, you're going to respond differently. So if they give you an 8 to 10, this is the best kind of response. You want people to be happy. You want people to be in a good place. This is an opportunity to learn about them, to celebrate, to connect, right? They might tell you that their kid just won the dance competition last weekend. They might tell you about a project that they're crushing or something that went really well in a customer visit. Whatever it is, you're learning about them. You're learning what they value. They might also be putting out on a platter in front of you things that they want to be appreciated for or recognized for. It is a gift, right? So it's an opportunity. This is the easiest one, right? Hard to screw this one up. Fun. Middle one. If they give you the middle, I think this is the most fun conversationally because there's kind of a mixed bag of things going on. So you might ask a question first. If they say I'm at a 5 or a 6, it sounds like kind of a mixed bag. Talk to me. Let's start with what's been going well first. Like what's on the positive side of the ledger, and let them share that. And then you get a chance to say, okay, well, what's holding that number at a 6? Or what's the gap between being at a 6 and being at a 9 for you right now? You see how this works? Pretty easy. Just opens up conversation. And then the last one is, right, if you get a 1 to 3 when you're asking a question like this is a call for help, right? They're letting you know they're struggling or that there's something going on that doesn't feel great. That doesn't mean they're going to be ready to share it with you because it might be personal. It could be who knows. But they're at least willing to put it on your radar. So I always like to say, that doesn't sound great. Is there something going on that you're comfortable talking about or sharing with me? Or is there something, what's happening? Is it a work thing? Like, let's get into it. So you ask some questions. Now, makes sense, right? Ask the follow-up. This is where the magic happens. When you ask that follow-up question is where the magic happens. So that brings us to step number 3, which is the second place that we often mess it up. And step number 3 is shut up and listen. Right? Because we're going to want to jump in and reassure or solve or do things because that's what we do. We're managers, we're super solvers. This is not the time for that. This is the time for listening. And I don't just mean to hear, I mean truly listen. Pay attention. You listen with your eyes, you hear with your ears. So you pay attention to what they're showing you, right? What aren't they saying? What kind of body language are you picking up on, right? Really tune in, because this is where the good stuff happens. And if you listen, you're going to get all kinds of interesting things, so that then you get to step 4, and step 4 is to offer support or encouragement depending on what they need. Offering encouragement is pretty easy, right? It's amazing, things have been going well, you should be really proud of yourself, whatever. Or it's terrific to hear that your daughter just bowled a 297. That's incredible, keep me posted, whatever it is, right? That's the easy part. On the support side, sometimes that's where we get a little tangled up because somebody might share a personal thing here. They might get into a personal well-being thing. Number 1, I will remind you, you are not their therapist, nor should you, no matter how many Holiday Inn Expresses you've stayed at, you should not play their therapist. And so the key is to say, how can I help? Or, my favorite is, I stole from Brene Brown, which I will now share with you so you can steal it yourself, is what does support from me look like for you right now? And now if depending on how much they're struggling, they might say, I don't know. A lot of times they just want to know you care. They just want to know that you're aware of what's going on with them. But offering the support matters. And then if they tell you something that you can help with, great. If they tell you something that you shouldn't be helping with, but you can help connect them to resources, do that. Right? Treat them as if they were a friend. Right? If a friend brought you an issue you're not capable or skilled enough to solve, you would help them find a resource. That's what you do. So 4 steps to an effective check-in. Does that make sense? You can use this, right? Yes? Good, because we're going to do it right now. I'm going to invite you now to find a partner in a moment. I want you might have to get up and move if you don't have someone, but find a partner and I'm going to ask you to check in with each other. I'm going to give you 2 minutes each. Now this is not a role play, we're not pretending. This is a real check-in. Ask the question, ask the follow-up, listen, all 4 steps, okay? So real check-in, 2 minutes each. I will let you know when you're halfway. At halfway, then you'll switch and the other person will check in with you. You got it? You can use this question right here for your check-in. 4 steps. Clear? Ready, set, go.
So,
All right, that's 2 minutes. That's 2 minutes. If you haven't switched, time to switch. 2 minutes. Easy peasy. All right, let's bring it back together. If you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. Welcome back. All checked in. Talk to me about that. What was the experience like? What did you notice? A lot more engaging, sorry. Yeah, the enthusiasm of legitimately being asked and someone listening. Yeah, seen heads nodding. What else? Yes?
We had a hard time switching because we were actually we went into the actual check-in conversation.
You're in it. Yes. It's like, how rude. He just interrupted us. It's the least favorite part of my job, but you have the rest of you have 2 days to reconnect and sort it out. So that's the gift.
You can ask better questions.
You can ask better questions, for sure. For sure. Is anybody surprised by how quickly you got pretty deep? Like, that was 2 minutes, friends. 2 minutes. The thing I love about this, when I started experimenting and stumbled on using this approach years ago, is that, I don't know about you, but I don't have a lot of time. I'm not time rich. And especially in organizations these days, everybody's time strapped. We know we need to spend time with our people. The problem is we're not efficient. So when I get together with my people, I want to get into it as quickly as we can, right? Get to the thing. Let's talk. Let's have the conversation that matters. That's what I love about this. That's the superpower. If you learn to do this well, you'll be able to get into the conversation that matters quickly so that you're talking about the things that will actually have an impact. Now, here's the bonus for you. This thing works like magic with middle school and high school kids. It works with your spouse. It works with your friends. Now, with your spouse, word of caution, right? Maybe tee it up with hey, I heard this guy said this thing. I'd like to try it. Because, safe, want to keep ourselves safe. So, all right, so one of the questions that might be coming up for you is okay, this is great, but is this the only question, right? What are the great questions look like that aren't this? So I have a resource that I'm going to share with you. If you want it at the end, I'll have a QR code you can scan to get a bunch of resources, including, and I should have said this earlier, but I love watching people take notes and pictures. I'm going to send you the slides. It's just a little validation that you care. So anyway, slides are coming. But this will be coming you'll be able to request this at the end of the session. Okay, so 4-step check-in process. We've got it now, right? We see the magic because we did it. Okay, you'll be able to use that throughout the conference too. check in. So now let's bring these two together now. Right, so we talked about cultivation mindset is all about needs and obstacles and sort of sorting out where people are at so we can support them to do the thing that we know they're sort of capable of doing, that their default setting sort of prones them towards doing. And we have this check-in conversation. And so I want to bring it together. How do we use this check-in framework in order to support performance, to cultivate performance? And this brings me to kind of the third fun fact about farmers, and then I will stop. This will be the last one, is that if you know farmers, the other thing that you know about them is that they know, and gardeners too, I would say, same thing, they know a lot about the plants that they are putting in their fields or in their gardens. They can tell you all kinds of details beyond what you could ever care about their plants. And so if we are going to cultivate human performance, we too have to have a deeper level of understanding of what drives human performance, just like the farmers do. And so one of the things I want to share is some insights that I stumbled into, I guess, over 25 years of leading and managing people myself, and then supporting managers and leaders in managing performance. One of the things is I was curious about in learning about performance, the place that I seem to always learn the most is when we were confronting underperformance issues, right? When people weren't performing and you had to figure out what was going on, that's where you really get serious about, okay, what's going on? What do they need? What's missing? What are the obstacles? And what I've learned over the past 25 years is that pretty much every performance issue I've ever encountered is boiled down to one of 5 reasons. There's one of 5 causes going on. We tend to like it to be very complicated. I don't think it's very complicated. It's one of 5 things. This is what they are. The number one cause by far that I have found is this: I don't know what's expected of me. And in my experience, and don't quote me on this number because this is anecdotal, this is my own experience, but in my experience over the course of that time, I would say probably 80% of the performance issues that I've encountered can be explained with this cause, right? This is a big one. And if it's not this one, it is probably number 2, which is I didn't know that I wasn't performing, wasn't aware. I might be clear on what's expected, but I didn't realize that I was falling short. And I find that accounts for probably, I'm making numbers up, another 15%. So vast majority of performance issues in my experience are these 2 things. If it's not these 2 things, then it's one of these other 3. I don't know how, right? Legitimately don't have a skill, don't know how. I am unable to do it for some reason, whether it's some literally unable to do it. Maybe I got promoted beyond where I should have been. Maybe I've got something going on outside of work that's getting in the way, whatever, unable. And the last is, I don't want to. I don't want to. The ironic part of it, I've already told you what I found to be the most common cause, but when a manager shows up or you're dealing with an issue, what do we usually like to immediately think is the issue? Number 5. That's where we go. That's what led me to asking that question. Do people really not want to perform? I don't think that's very common. It happens, but not all that often. And so what I realized is if you have these 5 things, as I started reflecting on these 5 causes, is these 5 causes reveal needs and obstacles, right? There's something missing in each of these cases. So for number 1, what's missing there? Clarity. Right? There's a lack of clarity about what's expected, whether that's the quantitative outcomes, whether that's behavioral, whatever. Lack of clarity. I don't have clear expectations. What's missing in number 2? Communication, but specifically, if I don't know how I'm performing, feedback, right? Lack of feedback. Third, I don't have a snazzy thing to do there, so it's just know-how, lack of skills, whatever. I'm unable to do it as a lack of capability. And the last one is, of course, a lack of desire. So once I realized this, I realized we have this list, right? I call these the 5 drivers of performance. And you can use them in a couple of ways. You can use them, 1, to make sure you're setting people up for success, sort of as your checklist to make sure you're setting people up. Are you hiring people that have the right skill, putting them in the right spots? Are you making sure they're crystal clear about expectations and making sure you have processes and practices in place so that they know how they're doing against those expectations at all time, right? You can use it to set people up and make sure they're set up to perform. But I think perhaps the more useful tool often for us, not that that isn't super useful, is it is a diagnostic checklist for when you have someone that isn't performing well. And so if you haven't, and I'm going to talk you through that right now, how to do that, how to use this as a diagnostic tool. Because has anybody ever had to deal with an underperforming employee? Maybe that doesn't happen in top workplaces, but where I worked, we always had those people, and that was always the hardest part of my job, the most unpleasant part of my job. But part of that's because we were trapped in old processes that made us treat them like they were broken and needed to be fixed. But we can do this in a very different way. So if we have someone that's underperforming, we know they would otherwise be performing. So it's kind of like going to the doctor saying, I don't feel well. The doctor's going to have a checklist, starting with the most common cause, and we're going to eliminate them one at a time until we figure out what's actually going on, and then we'll treat that. So that's how we're going to use this. You interested in this? You with me? All right, so what I'm going to share with you actually now, I'm going to share 2 tools with you that you're going to use in this process. These are 2 tools I usually teach as part of my management training program. I'm going to give them to you today. They will have instruction, everything. You're going to be able to get this in your download package if you want that, because I want this to be the most practical keynote perhaps you have ever attended in your life. So that is my goal today. So we're going to talk about one of the tools. First tool is how you diagnose a lack of clarity. I call this the clarity check-in. See where this all comes together now. So we're going to use a couple of great questions in order to open up a conversation that helps us diagnose clarity. So here's how the process works. This is a conversation that you schedule with an individual. So manager to individual, you schedule the conversation about a week in advance. The language is, hey, I want to get together for a meeting to make sure that we have alignment around your expectations in your role. I want to make sure you're crystal clear so that you're set up for success. Not a performance evaluation. We're not evaluating anything. If anything, we're evaluating my performance at ensuring you are clear. So here's what I'd like you to do. Next week, we're going to meet at this time. Between now and then, I would like you to write down your responses to these questions. Okay? Here's the questions. Number 1, what are the 3 most important expectations of your role that determine your success? Top 3 priorities, right? Should be pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Perhaps not. Second question, how is your success measured? Third question, what does success look like in your role? You ask them to write it down. Now here's the key part of this. While they're doing that, in that week, you as their manager, if you're doing it for one of your people, you too sit down and write down your answers for them to these questions. And then when you come together and sit down, all you're doing is basically comparing responses. And I'm going to warn you, first time you do this, there will be misalignments. None of us are as clear often as we think we are. So there will be misalignments, and that's okay because that misalignment exists. You're just bringing it into the open so you can do something about it. So you sit down, you have the conversation, and you just say, you remind them up front. This is not an evaluation. There's no critique happening here. This is about making sure you're clear. So let's talk about it. If their list is different than yours, if they have something on there that's not on your list, be curious about it. This is where you ask the follow-up question. That's really interesting. I didn't have that on my list. Talk to me about how you ended up putting that on your list. What kind of signals are you getting that's telling you that that's the top 3? And then by the end of the conversation, you're aligned, right? You walk away aligned. Best practice then is ask that individual to shoot you an email just summarizing where you landed. Now you've got documentation that they're clear, right? Clarity check-in. Helpful? Yes, okay. So that's how we make sure we've got clarity. This is coming in your inbox so that you can use it, you can share it, you can teach it, you can do with it what you'd like. Now we've got clarity. Let's say we go through that process. We now know we're clear. They're still not fixing performance. So now we got to figure out if they're getting the feedback they need. So that's where you're going to use a tool called the performance check-in. Performance check-in process is exactly the same. Set a meeting, send some questions for them to respond to, and then you do the same thing. Different questions. It starts by saying, what are the top 3 expectations? Because you guys have those. You've just done that in the clarity check-in. But then you ask them these questions. How would you describe your level of performance overall? where are you exceeding and where are you needing to improve? And then you sit down and you compare notes. And again, it's important to remind them, not a performance evaluation. We're just comparing to make sure you're getting the feedback and information you need to perform. Make sense? You use these two tools, it will solve, like I said, my estimation, 95% of your performance issues. You'll be able to request these in a minute. All the instructions are in there, including a script you can use in the email when you send the email out to schedule the meeting. Okay? So there it is. You eliminate those two, that covers most of them. Most performance issues will resolve themselves. If it doesn't, then you have one of the other three issues going on. Know-how's pretty easy. Roll up your sleeves and get in and check that they actually have the skills they need. You know how to do that. Have them show you, observe, get feedback, whatever. Know-how's easy to fix because it's a training issue. It's a coaching issue. Capability can be a lot of things. Capability is about saying, hey, we're at a point where we're at the end of the road, man. We've done everything we can. I don't know what's going on, but we can't continue down this path. So either we got to fix it or you're going to have to find something else to do. So if there's, first question is there something going on outside of work that you haven't shared with me? Let's make sure there's no well-being issue. Second is then you dive in and see, do they have the resources? Is it a resource issue? If not, did we put them in the wrong job? What is it? But let's be humane and let's figure out what's going on and help them get to a better place. And then the last is desire. Listen, if you go through this whole process and they're still not doing it, they just don't want to. So you get to invite them to go be somebody else's problem. And you've got a whole bunch of documentation that you just created. And it felt good to them. And the good news is they'll usually opt themselves out. Because it's only fun to underperform if nobody's paying attention. Right? That is for real. That is the truth. Pay attention, they go away. So there it is. What did we talk about today? We talked about cultivation mindset. We talked about the 4-step check-in process, and we just talked about the 5 drivers of performance and how you can use them. Right? So this is what I want you to remember. Performance is cultivated, not managed. Can you say that with me? Performance is cultivated, not managed. Amen. There it is. There's your free resources. Thank you. So free resources, scan that. It'll ask you for your name and email. If you fill that in right now, it'll literally be in your email box by the time you get out of this room. You'll have a bunch of resources. So I'll let you do that for a second. That does have my contact information if you want to email questions to me or anything doesn't work. You got that? And then here is, see a few. And then here is my last slide. That is my cell phone number. I'm going to be here for the next 2 days. So if you have questions about any of this, if you want to talk shop, if you want to just connect, shoot me a text. We will make it happen between now and Thursday when we all head back home. Again, congratulations. Thank you for all you do. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you around the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you. I did not pull him, I promise.
That's a good step. Perfect.